Good evening. Thanks very much for joining us on this tasting event for Cadenhead tonight. My name's Cameron, and beside me we have Ranald Watson, and we will be trying 8 different samples from the new release from our Authentic collection, which will be released this Friday. I don't know if any of you have seen any of our socials as well, but we have been asking asking for questions as well, to which we've got some that we'll be answering over the course of the evening. But if any of you have got any comments or questions to ask us as well, please feel free to add them in, and we'll try our best to answer them. Anything we don't know, we'll just make up anyway. So, but we will try our best to answer as many questions as possible. So, as we've got 8 cask strength whiskies here, we probably should get underway with the first one, which I'll introduce it if you want.
Absolutely.
Excellent. So, on your tasting pack, you should have a dram number 1, which is from the Linkwood distillery. So this is 10 years old, from Linkwood and Speyside. It's a natural cask strength of 55.4%, and this was spent its entire lifetime within a bourbon hogshead as well. Going by the colour, I think it was probably a refill hogshead that when we acquired it. So we've done absolutely nothing to this apart from mature it on our warehouse on site and then bottle it when we see fit. And obviously, before we went on camera, I had a little try of it as well, just to remind me of the dramas. We've not tried it ourselves for maybe a few weeks or months, depending on when we chose it. And Linkwood, I think, is a really good starting whiskey. It's a really good whiskey in general. Anyway, I think as distilleries go, especially for independent bottlers, Linkwood to me is one of the stalwarts as well. It's maybe not the most market distillery, it's not the most desirable name amongst maybe some people who are following the whiskey industry, but it's generally really good quality. It's got that light fruitiness, quite zesty, a little bit of orange notes, sort of biscuity notes too, a little bit of grassiness as well, and it's just a really good, I mean, say sipping whiskey, but it's something that you could enjoy maybe a bit too much, where you realise that a lot of the bottle sort of disappears pretty quickly. Again, that's maybe more my style than maybe ourselves, but to me, it's a really good style of whiskey. I think it's something, probably going to cater to my kind of style of whiskey, where maybe years ago I was probably more towards the heavier style, maybe more of the peat. Over the years, I've drifted towards more of the sort of maybe lighter, fruitier, sort of Speyside, a bit more subtle. But I think this is a really good starting point for this one.
Yeah, I think it's quite easy to fall into the trap of, judging a whiskey by where it's made, as in its region, or Speysides are typically this, Highlands are typically that, or whatever. A distillery like Linkwood, it's, as you say, it's light, floral, bit of sweetness to it, zesty. It's a whiskey that's not too sweet, and this is a really good example of it. It's a proper whiskey.
Definitely.
And I think at its natural strength, what did we say, 55.4?
55.4, and we get 276 bottles from that, so not an awful lot, still pretty limited. For those joining us who might not know or much about Authentic collection, the Authentic collection are always bottled at cask strength, single casks, and are available only from our Cadenhead shops as well. So these will be released on Friday. I think all apart from one is available, but we'll talk about that later on. And this one, it's actually going for £55 a bottle, this one too. And I think for this day and age as well, for something as quality a dram as this too, I think it's a good starting point. Not a good start, but actually, when we do tastings as well, I always kind of feel sorry for the first whiskey, because you sometimes forget it later on in the tasting. And it's not that you wouldn't start, it's not that it can't sort of maybe hold its own after maybe trying some of the others. Maybe some of the others maybe a bit more boisterous, maybe got some nuances that could maybe overpower it. This is just, it's a good, light, refreshing one. And also the first dram, people might not have had any alcohol beforehand, so it might be quite strong to begin with, and usually maybe takes a dram or two to maybe get into. So I always think that the fact that this one can actually stand up, even as the first dram of the day, I'm assuming it's the first dram of the day anyway, maybe, that it still holds that kind of quality behind it as well.
I mean, it's not a mild or mellow or a meek
No.
whiskey. The cask strength certainly helps to lift that up, but I say it's got plenty of character about it. And I think for a distillery like Lakewood, you know, it's a big distillery. It produces a lot of alcohol, you know, key component in some fairly well-known blends, but it's good, you know. And I think there's probably a misconception that whiskey that goes into blends, nobody really cares about it or pays that much attention to it as a single malt. Whereas, you know, when we bought this cask, we bought it as part of a parcel of casks from the distillery's owner, and it's not a case of, oh yeah, great, you're buying 20, come to the warehouse and pick your favourite 20. It's, well, do you want 20 casks? Yeah, we do. Okay, here's your 20 casks. So it says, I don't mean hit or miss, but there's not any analysis of it before we buy it.
Yeah.
So this could just as easily have ended up going for blending as it did end up in the hands of an independent bottler. So I think it just shows you the quality of the distillery itself, really.
Excellent. Just looking at some of the comments here. Obviously, one of them is actually from somebody who visits quite a lot. We've got Ruth there. It says, "Cheer up, Ranald." So you're obviously looking a bit sad on the screen there to begin with.
I'll do my best.
It's also said it's wonderfully apple. Yeah, it's definitely got a lot of that. Those kind of hints. As Ranald sort of pointed out there, that Lakewood is a main component in a lot of the blends that Diageo use as well. And funnily enough, just after I did a tasting earlier on for some of the people who are in the whiskey school this week at Springbank Distillery, and a couple of the people on the tasting were actually, I never really thought about it this way, but they were so envious of our job because they were actually going, you get to try things that nobody gets to try.
And here's me sitting here all miserable.
This is you all miserable too.
So,
and sometimes I don't think about it like that, where when it was spoke about Lakewood and the people were saying, the people asking the questions were saying, you know, like, you're getting to try like the components and things that are maybe used for Johnny Walker or Giant B or whatever. So you can do the breakdown of it. It's not necessarily the final product, but it's the components that make it up. And another thing that we always point out is that the whiskies used in these blends, it's not like the leftovers or the poor quality whiskies, because you can't just put a bunch of poor quality whiskies together to make a good blend. You need to have like good characteristics within it. And as I said, Lakewood, for independent bottlers especially, over the years I've been in the company, probably yourself too, we've had some cracking Lakewoods as well, and it's still in the market at a price and an availability that's not silly, like maybe some distilleries where it's getting overpriced, or it's not getting too flooded. There's still Lakewood there, but it's not a case where it's, you know, it's just flooding the market, maybe like certain whiskies do at certain times. So it's still got a nice exclusivity, but also at a kind of point where you can still get it and not have to remortgage the house for it as well.
It's still at the stage where you're pleased when you see some Lakewood popping up in an email or something. It's like, it's not rare, but it's not so widely available, as you say, that it's like, oh god, here's more young, heavily peated Bunnahabhain. It's like, oh yes, some Lakewood available. That's good. That's interesting, because you're right. It's easy to start looking through a list of casks on a spreadsheet and just be like, yeah. But when you stop and think about it, and as the guys explained or suggested earlier, these whiskies have all got a part to play in Scotch whisky. And generally, they're pretty decent, or we can do stuff to help make them decent. So it's quite a reasonable position to be in. And
again, we didn't have to do much with this one. Ralph kind of hinted on there. When we buy the casks, when we're buying casks, we'll buy in bulk, and 99.9% of the whiskey we buy, we don't get to try beforehand. So when we buy 10, parcel of 10, 20, 30 casks of a particular distillery at one go. Now, generally, they'll be of a decent quality. They don't come where they're unusable. You know, they're generally of a way where they might not be ready to bottle at that point, but they might need either a bit of re-racking, which we'll come on to later on, or they might just a bit of time. But sometimes you get casks where you just go, do you know what, that's actually pretty good, we'll maybe bottle that now. And we tend not to do that. This was a purchase we did maybe a year or two ago.
Aye, a couple of years anyway, I think.
Which we would still get at a price which we can price it ourselves. Because normally when we're doing the purchasing, we're trying to maybe purchase, because it's based on the market just now, where it is, prices are going through the roof. Like you probably notice yourself at the end product, but even for us buying casks as well, it is huge. But we're buying not for now, but for years to come. We're investing in the future of it. So when we buy casks, sometimes we'll buy casks now, maybe a bit overpriced, but we're not intending to use them now. Maybe when they're a bit older, that they'll be at a value which is more reasonable. But sometimes we'll get them and go, that's really good just now, but maybe we couldn't really sell it at that point. We'd have to, maybe if a bottler was needing to get that as a cash flow, I can understand that, but we're in a quite fortunate position that we can get stocks of ones like the Language where we can go, now we can still bottle this at a reasonable price, and it's a good quality that I think most people would enjoy.
I think it'd be hard to find a fault with that. Yeah. Liquid, price-wise, quality-wise, it's just what an independent bottler's all about, taking a good cask and bottling it and getting it out there. And it's reminded me that I've got to pick one up on Friday as well.
It's a good point. I'm just going to look at some of the questions. There was some that was put into some of our socials. Carly was actually looking at earlier on, she sent me a list.
Pick an easy one to start.
I know, I'm just actually thinking that first of all, we go. I think it was an easy one for me to go with. Will we be seeing more bourbon casks in the future and less finishes?
Pick an easy one. Hopefully, yeah. I mean, it's fair to say and fair to observe that we have been doing quite a lot of finishing recently, and that ties in with a couple of things. It ties into what you were talking about, Cameron, with you work with what you buy in. How do you make it interesting? How do you provide a variety in your range of bottlings? And maybe over recent years, last couple of years, we maybe have been a bit more heavier on the finishes than on the non-finished whiskies. But as an independent bottler, you're working with what you're given. It's fair to say we're not taking an absolutely stunning bourbon cask matured whiskey and sticking it into a PX cask or an Oloroso cask just for fun. Maybe occasionally, but there's generally a reason to do it. We've maybe got stock from that distillery in bourbon, or maybe the spirit, although it's got good age to it, was in a very inactive cask. So as well as re-racking into these different sherries and all the other cask types, we've actually done some re-racking into bourbon, first of all bourbon and stuff, just because it helps provide that variety. What you do find is that the sherry finishes and stuff have a much more immediate impact and probably give you something you can work with quicker, whereas a bourbon finish might not be as immediate. The bourbon influence is more subtle, it's not as powerful as some of the sherries especially, but yeah, they are coming. It's that thing again, bottled whiskey that we want to drink, we'd only be bottling the bourbon cask stuff, not because there's anything wrong with the sherries, but bourbon cask whiskey for me is all I really need. Some refill sherry is pretty good. Some of the alternative and the less traditional sherry types have worked out really nicely for us, but yeah, you've got to try and provide that bit of variety, but at the same time, you're working with what you've got, what you can buy in, what's been left lying in the warehouses.
I think variety is the key here as well, and we've got 8 whiskies here, 5 different cask types. Everyone's got different tastes and palate, and a lot of the styles that you might get that are available that are in bourbon as well, that maybe are good quality just now, they can be very similar flavour profiles as well. So there's nothing wrong with them at all, but sometimes you need to sort of give a little bit of variety as well. And as Ranald said there, we do have a lot of bourbons. There's actually a question here from Christian saying, what made you bottle this Liquid now? Really likes it. I can imagine it getting even better with more time. But I understand you have to bottle something and can't just wait forever. Well, with that, you've got to bottle something at some point, and we do have other casks of it too. So we had sister casks of the same Liquid. Some we've left to mature on. This was probably the best one out of the one that we chose. I thought was good. As things stood up. Some we've just left to go. Some we've re-racked, because you could tell even at that point, as Ranald said earlier, we don't just do it for the sake of doing it. a lot of the time we are getting very tired wood with these things. But we've got the time, we've got the ability to change casks as well. And I think that's something that is an advantage that we've got, and be able to do that too. Next, will we move on to dram number 2?
Absolutely.
Funnily enough, it's another bourbon cask. It's actually 37.5% of the release is actually bourbon. So there's.
Did you just do that off the top of your head?
I was trying to work on 100 divided by 8 there, so 12.5, I think. Yeah, there we go. But yeah, I do get that as well. This one again, like we're going to move on to the Glengarry
11-year-old.
11-year-old, 54.1% ABV. This one's actually from a bourbon barrel. The previous one's from a bourbon hogshead. And we got 246 bottles from this cask as well. It's slightly different to the Glengarry as well.
I think hugely different. I think it's much like juicier, fruity, tropical, honey. Like the Linkwood, I thought was more. I don't know if austere is the right kind of word, but it was tighter.
Yeah.
Maybe would benefit from a wee drop of water.
The water, I think, helps with the Linkwood.
Whereas this one, right off the bat on the nose, it's so rich, honeyed. It really draws you in. I think this is
a lot of marzipan and stuff in it too.
And I think it's interesting to look at this in comparison to the Linkwood. So you've got 2 bourbon casks, probably refill for the Linkwood, probably first fill here.
Yeah.
So just saying bourbon, just saying sherry, just saying Calvados, just saying whatever, doesn't automatically mean the whiskey is going to have a certain style to it. I think the contrast between these two is quite stark.
And Glengarry as well is quite an interesting distillery too. It's one that, again, it's got a lot of popularity with its own bottlings as well. We've done quite a few in the past, some older ones, some younger one, mainly bourbon cask as well. And we've done some re-racking. I think with one of our warehouse tastings that was in a 24. Mm-hmm. I believe.
Yeah.
I think it was like 8 or 9 years old as well when we done that, maybe 3 or 4 years in the port. But it's actually got quite a robust spirit as well that can handle a bit of re-racking as well. There are, when we're doing some of these re-rackings too, that there's maybe some spirit that we've got to assess that maybe you wouldn't necessarily put it in certain types of casks, and especially a tawny port, which can be quite boisterous. The ports, the PXs, the Olorosos, they're ones that maybe can only you put maybe spirits that maybe got a bit more body behind it, a bit more. I mean, body, that's the wrong word to say. They've got a kind of characteristic that can maybe hold that kind of spirit. Maybe a lighter style would maybe get a bit lost within that.
There's something peated's an easy one because it can stand up to most. Something like a Springbank probably re-racks quite well. Bowmore, Leche, Talisker. It'd be nice to have some Talisker to re-rack, but that's a bad example. But then some of the lighter spirits, as you say, might not interact quite so well.
We've got Gav's drams. What's the difference between a bourbon hogshead and a bourbon barrel? That's a good point, actually, Gav. Sometimes I forget about the actuals. It's the size of the cask. A hogshead is about 250 litres and a barrel's 200 litres. So you're going to get more wood contact with a barrel. Therefore, the spirit will probably have more contact with it. In theory, that should give more influence from the flavour from the cask. Not to say that a hogshead is going to have that much of a difference. It also depends on whether it's a first fill too. The hogsheads that's a refill one that we had there. The first fill bourbon is always going to have a bit more influence, but maybe a refill barrel might have a bit less than it after it's been used. But the difference is the sizes. I've got one here talking about the bourbon barrels. You noticing any difference in quality of barrels considering some bourbon distillers are now rinsing out their casks?
Can I do that?
Go for it.
Not on the barrels that we buy in empty. So obviously Cadenhead's part of the J&A Mitchell group, so we share cask purchasing with Springbank and Kilkerran. So when we're buying barrels to be filled at the distillery, we don't buy barrels that have been this high pressure steam rinsed, because why would you? You're buying your barrel to impart flavour, so you don't want all that flavour to be stripped out before you get it. So we've got agreements with our various cask suppliers that we won't be sent any of those. You know, we buy some barrels direct from distilleries in America. We buy a lot of them through Speyside Cooperage, and the guys at Speyside Cooperage have been great. You know, we've worked with them for years and years and years, and they were actually the ones that alerted us to this kind of notion that some distilleries, and a lot of distilleries probably in America, are steam cleaning their casks to get every last drop out. And they said, and they're able to offer us that choice, and we said, yeah, well, we don't want anything that's been through that. When the casks come to us full of whiskey, as in the case of this Glengarry or the liquid that preceded it, we don't really have much to go on in terms of what happened with those casks. Obviously, 10, 11-year-old whiskey, these casks were filled before that kind of process was really stepped up, so you can be fairly sure that they've not been high pressure rinsed or anything. So I suppose the proof of that pudding's still to come in the next few years as distilleries maybe do start to fill those types of casks. But as Cameron said already, we would get some first fill casks and some refill casks. Distilleries don't really detail whether it's first, you'll know first fill, but you don't know whether it's a second refill or a third refill or a fourth. Sometimes you suspect some of the stuff we get might be on its sixth or seventh.
They're pretty much holding vessels, some of the stuff that we'll get that maybe, you know, you think, oh, there's a parcel of 14-year-old from a particular distillery comes in. This is the bit where everybody says, that must be great, trying all these whiskies. When you get 20 that come in and they look like that, it's
you get the distilleries you make.
That's true. And sometimes, you know, there are one or two that are actually really good at that. But
well, we bought the Ewan, I think, 3 years ago, maybe, that was very spirit driven. That I think you were quite a big.
That was a big
supporter of.
I don't think it was that. It wasn't quite.
It wasn't quite like that, but it was certainly on the
borderline,
the less cask influence side. But anyway,
it was good. It was really good stuff.
Absolutely,
yeah, it was good spirit.
And I think, in fairness, we give you a bit of a hard time about that.
But it still do.
Absolutely, but it's showcased that, and it's something that only an independent bottler would do.
Yeah.
As a distillery, you're unlikely to put out a 14 or 15-year-old whiskey that was very, very, very spirit driven. So letting people get to see, naked's not a great word, but Dalyuan in its most raw form was actually pretty decent. And it wasn't raw spirit by any means. It was nicely rounded and a bit of vanilla and stuff to it. But
that's a good point, actually. I think that a lot of people who do independent bottling tastings are. Independent bottling tastings probably isn't something you're going to start with in your whiskey journey. So there's a high chance that the vast majority of people watching have been drinking cask strength whiskies or whiskies from independent bottlers. So they do quite like to find out different characteristics. But if it was somebody's first introduction into whiskey, would you give them some of these whiskies? Probably not. You know, and that's not to say that they would, but I think the vast majority would. You would want to try and build up the kind of the flavour profile. So something like that, more spirit-driven one that we did with the Dalyuan, because it's a niche, and you get 200-300 bottles from it as well. So it's not like we're bottling. If the decision was to bottle 10,000-20,000 of them, I would maybe change my opinion on what that was. That would.
But it certainly wasn't as big and juicy as this beautiful Glengarry, that's for sure.
All good so far. Yeah, pretty good feedback from the Glengarry definitely as well. One for Cadenhead is entirely unavailable in Brooklyn, New York. It might be available in the entire city. Of New York. Any way to address that? Jenna McIntosh is actually our export sales manager, and she's on holiday just now, so I'll throw her under the bridge with her, under the bus with that one. No, Cadenheads do get to America. We do have an international range as well. Unfortunately, when you do have a country of 330 million people, and even our large range maybe only contains, 10,000 bottles when the whole entire release to do the whole world, it's very difficult to get it. We are trying to get whiskies in bigger volumes and to our customers and to our markets, but it is a huge challenge as well. I think we're bottling. We've got bigger releases than we've done in the past, but the demand for them is absolutely enormous just now. And I think we're in over 20 markets in the world, and we can't fulfill the needs for each one of those just now. The demand is so high. But we definitely are in America. It's just very difficult to get into every part of it just now. So if not, I'll blame Jenna for that one just now. She can't defend herself.
No. I mean, who handled America before Jenna, who's only been doing it for a year? In fact, not even. So you should calm yourself.
We'll go on to the next. Where are we here?
We're at number 3.
Number 3.
Tomato.
Perfect. So number 3 on the list here, we've got, as Ranald says, it's a 12-year-old from the Tomatin distillery, bottled a nice, easy to remember cask strength of 55.5% alcohol. This was initially in a bourbon hogshead up until August 2019, where it was moved into a Calvados cask. And this is basically a process that we call re-racking. It's where we move spirit from one cask to another, and it is pretty much to give it a change, give it a difference in quality. There's something that maybe we feel initially that cask had before it, the spirit in the cask before wasn't doing something for it, didn't have maybe the right flavour profile. Maybe it was in for a certain amount of time, and if a cask is maybe in for 10, 11 years and there's no real improvement to it, leaving it another 5, 10 years doesn't necessarily mean it's going to get better. You could end up having a 16, 17-year-old whiskey that still can be a bit off. So we always take a decision at that point whether we want to maybe change it to try and boost it in a way we think will improve the spirit. I think it's probably a nice way to put it.
And I think, with a very hollow apology for reading our official tasting notes in this, but this one we've got things like baked apples, geraniums, gooseberries, candy floss, short crust pastry, cloves, aniseed, apple crumble, cured meats. So some of those flavours are from the spirit itself. I'd suggest the geraniums, the gooseberries, the short crust pastry, and probably the cured meat were all the flavours that the whiskey had 3-4 years ago before we transferred it into the Calvados. Yeah. Now those flavours are all pretty interesting, but on their own I don't think they're that outstanding. So by putting it in the Calvados cask for, it will be nearly 4 years you've been in there prior to bottling, you're adding to it. So we're not masking the flavours that the spirit itself had. You're just adding to it, you're adding layers on top. And I think this is a really good example of it. I mean, nearly 4 years is a long finish.
Yeah, definitely.
It's so long a finish, it's not really a finish. It's more than a third of the whiskey's life has been in this secondary cask.
One was pretty good tonight, actually.
On fire. So, you're getting the baked apples, the candy floss, the cloves, the aniseed, the apple crumble all coming from the Calvados casks, sitting on top with the flavours of the whiskey itself. So it's quite a nice combination, I think.
I think it goes back to what maybe saying earlier on about variety as well. And I think as well, when we're selecting the casks as well, we also can't just select for what our preferences are. We have to look at it in an overall picture where we will check the spirit first. We'll check if there's any flaws within it. We try and inspect it as much as we can. We're almost we're almost looking at trying to find the bad points to begin with. And then what we do is we look at, this has actually got some quite interesting characteristics. It's got really nice floral notes. It might have certain fruity notes or earthy notes or whatever. It doesn't necessarily mean that you or I love each one, but we can understand that there might be a market or there's somebody there who would appreciate this, because everybody does have different palates. As I said, our preference is probably more toward bourbon or refill sherry casks. Some people don't want a bourbon or a refill sherry cask. They might prefer first fill or things like the Calvados or the Armagnac one we've got later on. So it is the variety of trying to give as much different kind of flavour profiles as possible. And using a distillery like Tomatin as well, which is really well established distillery. I've bottled a lot of good Tomatin in the past.
Tomatin bottle a lot of good tomatoes.
Tomatin,
So
yeah,
you're
exactly.
on to a winner straight away.
So it is something. And actually, looking back at the notes, it wasn't so much that the cask was bad. It was just maybe lacking something. Something to try and enhance it a little bit. And that's sometimes what it is. It's not always because it's bad per se. It's just you just need a little boost, a little help with it. Because even the best of spirit, even you work with Springbank a lot as well, where if you've got a really poor cask, it's still not going to. It still needs to have some kind of quality of wood.
Yeah.
Even the best of spirits or whatnot. And with this one, it's nothing against tomatin, because we've bought a lot of bourbon tomatin in the past, and we've never touched a lot of it. We have re-racked some of it, of course, but we've re-racked everything. There's not a spirit out there really that we haven't pretty much changed cask with that we own, of course.
The thing is, we come across very few flawed spirits. The biggest issue we come up against with casks that we've purchased would be immaturity rather than a lack of quality. That there are off notes in the spirit that you probably can't overcome sometimes. Being too sulphury, there's that kind of butyric, baby sick kind of note. You can't secondary mature, you can't finish them away. But we don't encounter that with the casks we buy very often at all. It's more like it's immature. It's still kind of new makey. It's been in tired wood, or it could be getting on in age, as you say, but not bringing any flavour out of the cask. So you still get the character of the spirit, and it's not off. It's just not ready for bottling. And so a secondary maturation, a finish, whatever you want to call it, can just add that little bit extra life to it and bring it along quite nicely.
Well, the last maybe 12 to 18 months, we've re-racked casks that are 25 years plus, like a number of them as well. And not because we wanted to either. It was more as in, like, initially you're hoping it's going to be good, but there's one in particular. It was a 27-year-old whiskey, and it was Inchmurn, I think it was that. And we had a sister cask, which was excellent. We actually bottled a couple of years ago, but this one, it didn't even taste as if it was 10 years old.
No.
And you're going, can we really leave this? But what we did, instead of putting into something that's first fill, we've tried to use refill casks for this to maybe give it more of a subtle maturation, because you want to try and let the spirit mellow out as well, but it just maybe it needs a bit of help from the wood. But there's that danger that if you just overpower it too much, it could be anything. It could be like a 5-year-old, or it could be too generic for anything like that. So there are careful. In fact, we did a 30-year-old as well. Again, we used a softer style sherry in a refill cask to try and maybe influence it a bit more, because at 30 years old, this particular distillery, it just wasn't. And after 30 years, we've given it enough time to try and let it be good on its own.
Try and open up.
Yeah.
I think that ties in as well with possibly at least one of the questions that were submitted in advance about using refill sherry casks, which we are doing. We've got a very, very, I kind of hesitate to say detailed, but we've got a pretty hardcore cask monitoring, cask management, whatever you want to call it, husbandry program going now, with what casks we're filling, what happens to the casks we empty. So a lot of the refill sherry casks we have on hand, are refill Springbank, refill Longrow, refill Kilkerran, which, fine, they'll give a lovely flavour to your whiskey, but if you're taking a tomatin or an ord or a linkwood or whatever and re-racking it into an ex-Springbank cask, you're going to lose a bit of that distillery's own character, because you're going to get the Springbank saltiness, the brininess. So you're not just getting the refill sherry influence, you're getting the whiskey influence as well. So it's not that easy just to go, let's take all Finley's empty Oloroso casks and use them for Cadenhead. So we actually use quite a lot of refill Cadenhead's casks now. We still use some refill Springbank and Longrow casks and all the rest of it, but we're actually refilling our own casks now. So we've almost got our own wee cask environment for Cadenheads, which is pretty good. But as I kind of mentioned earlier when I was talking about re-racking into bourbon, refill casks just take that bit longer to give enough influence to the whiskey before you're ready to bottle it. So as the next year or two goes by, you will start to see some more refill cask finishes. You'll see bourbon secondary maturations, because a bourbon finish on a bourbon cask makes no sense. But yeah, you will start to see that kind of stuff.
Well, it's even just the last week, I've been working with Finlay's our director of production as well, and we've been basically doing a kind of the next phase of re-racking with certain whiskies, because we've used a lot of the first fill that we needed at this point. But we've done a lot of re-racking over the years that we're now using the refills. So what we're doing is we're trying to do it with maybe some of the younger whiskies, as you're saying. It just takes a bit longer. So we don't need to maybe force as much, but it gives it a bit more time to kind of mellow out, to age with it too. But even then, I was looking at it going, oh, there's some really young ones, 2014, oh, they're really young. They're 9 already, which was quite depressing. I was thinking they're like 5 or 6. But even like, it's just to try and give them as well. But we are obviously still doing first fills for certain things, but with some of the younger whiskies, we're trying to put into to refill casks as well, to let it mellow out a bit longer and see how they progress with that too. Question here. In its natural state, is Glenkeith a malt you consider bottling? We've bottled many Glenkeith over the time. We've bottled a few in the last 18 months as it is. We bottled a 22-year-old. 23-year-old. And then we bottled a sister cask in the Authentic collection as well. All bourbon barrels, I think.
Yeah.
That's terrible, I should know that. But yeah, so Glenkeith, and Glenkeith is another one of those whiskies, especially the older it gets as well. Like it really, age doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be great. So if you leave something until it's 20, 30 years old, that means nothing. It's not going to be. It doesn't. Sometimes it can be amazing, but some of the older Glenkeiths we've done over the years, it just seem to come really mellow, because maybe they can be a little bit closed. Some of the casks that we've received over the years can maybe a bit closed. That doesn't necessarily mean maybe with Glenkeith themselves, maybe they've got a lot of maybe fresher casks that maybe when they're younger they're excellent quality, but maybe sometimes they're a bit closed for the ones that we've had. But the older ones have been absolutely stunning. So yeah, we've used that in the past. Is re-racking considered something different than finishing?
Re-racking is the process of beginning a finish. So before you finish the whiskey in another cask, the re-rack is the process of moving the whiskey from one cask to another. And finishing has kind of become the widely accepted term for using a second type of cask on it. But if we went to the guys in the warehouse and said, can you finish this cask for us? They'd probably think you mean drink it. Whereas if we say, can you re-rack this cask for us? That's the sort of industry phrase for it. But finishing is what you do to the whiskey. Re-racking is kind of the process of moving it from one cask to the other.
Perfect. Move on to number 4. Spilling everything here. So number 4 is from the Glenord distillery, 13 years old, 56.4%. And this one, again, was in a bourbon cask up until 2019, where we've actually put it into an Armagnac butt. So the Armagnac as well, with it's kind of similar to the last one earlier on. There are a lot of influence from the Armagnac in this one too. In fact, as well, it was from a bourbon hogshead initially. Then it was put into an Armagnac butt. So there was a lot of space in there too. We could maybe put another hogshead into it as well, because a butt, for those that don't know, is about 500 litres. It's quite a large size of cask, whereas a hogshead at maximum is 250 litres. Distilled in 2010, and we got 276 bottles from this one. But it's got a lot of those it's got the melted butter note. It's got a real kind of soft, kind of sort of sweet, kind of honey, kind of melon, kind of fruitiness to it. It's really, really lovely stuff, this one as well. But again, it's something with finishes. It depends on, with maybe some like purists who prefer maybe just the standard bourbon or sherry or whatnot. This is something that's maybe going a bit different, maybe to try an alternative, to give variation on what we're talking about earlier on.
It's another good example as well of you do it to provide a bit of variety. We're fortunate to possess quite a few casks from Glenord. So if you were to just bottle them all every time they're ready, you'd probably have an 11-year-old bourbon cask with you, a 12-year-old bourbon cask with you, a 13-year-old bourbon, and that's enough order for anybody. So if you can at least make it slightly different, enhance it a wee bit. And I think this is probably, could be wrong, but this cask, this Armagnac butt, would have been from an Armagnac that we bottled. So we bought the cask full of Armagnac, bottled the Armagnac, and then put the ord into it. So it's a Cadenhead's own re-rack, if you like.
Yep.
Finish.
Yeah, or secondary maturation, whatever we like to call it with that one. We've got a question as well about the bottle shape as well. We've had one or two actually, quite like. We've got another one here that they've asked us, what do you think about the new bottle shape? We like it, I think. It reminds me of a bottle for olive oil.
Yeah, that's because we're getting ready to branch out into Cadenhead's olive oil, Cadenhead's balsamic vinegar. No, we're not really. But variety is the spice of life. I really like the new bottle. I think it feels nice. I'm trying to write the whole joint here, but it feels solid. It feels weighty. It's a way of getting whiskey from a cask to your glass. At the end of the day, is the most important thing. But they're quite nice.
I think as well, we always go by what's inside the bottle as well. I actually do quite like the style of it too.
Yeah.
Pretty hefty as well. But it's always what's inside. We've not got the new bottle shape to try and to promote it more or whatever. This has actually been, we've tried to get this bottle shape for a couple of years now, but with a lot of issues, especially. We can blame COVID for that as well.
We can blame COVID. We can also, all our label design and stuff is done in-house. We don't employ agencies to do it. And, to be completely fair to George Redpath, who's our designer, George, as some of you will have heard us say in the past, George works with paper and pens. He doesn't work with computers. He does everything by hand, using his eye, not by CAD programs or any kind of design software or anything like that. So things take a little bit longer than they might, but it's all part of what we would hope you would consider the charm of Cadenhead, really. And it's also true to say that the guy who's saying it's all about what's in the bottle and not the bottle shape is not the guy who has to work on the bottling line. You have to consider what works on your bottling line as well and what makes those guys' lives a bit easier.
Well, and even with some bottle shape, not necessarily this one, but even some of our other ranges as well. The last couple of years we've had issues with supply as well, where we've had to use maybe multiple different styles of bottles because we've had to have a year leeway with some leeway with certain bottle shapes that we've had to use ones that we've ordered ones, but they've taken like 12 to 14 months to actually arrive. So, but this one's quite different. This was deliberate this time.
That kind of takes us right back to not the beginning of Cadenheads, but the beginning of Headley Wright and J.D. Mitchell's involvement in Cadenheads, and it was a glass shortage that enticed him to go and buy Cadenheads in the first place to get his hands on their massive supply of glass bottles. So glass shortages are nothing new.
Yep, that's exactly it. We've got a few comments from Italy saying we can help with the olive oil, but can we get the bottles? Which might
refill bottles.
Which is probably a segue as well into kind of maybe try the ranges that we do across the board as well. Obviously, just now the Authentic Collection is only available within our UK shops in Edinburgh, London, and Campbelltown just now. Now, these 8 single casks, I think, from them as well, it goes to the Cadenhead Club initially. They get advance notice on these ones. They then get an allocation first, so I think they pretty much get first dibs on it. Then it goes to the public a couple of weeks later. So there aren't that many left even from that too, and the demand just now is really, really high. Now we obviously do know we have customers within the EU as well and beyond, and eventually we have got other ranges as well that we are getting across. We're trying to do as well. We've got some new ones coming out too. Not much we can say about the.
Well, I mean, we can maybe touch on that. The update on, and I think we've maybe told people that we're hoping to find a solution to be able to at least sell each bottle within the EU, because the whiskies are available on our website, cadenhead.shop, but we're aware that shipping costs are high, the import taxes and stuff are high, and all the other stuff that the joys of Brexit have caused. But we are getting further down the road in discussions with a third-party company who offer a kind of forwarding service, and we're just at the point of trying to iron out some of the finer details about payments, who pays who does this, who does that. So tentatively, maybe by the end of this year, we'll be in a position where you should be able to log into cadenhead.shop, buy your choice of bottle and have it shipped to you at a not unreasonable cost. I know at the moment you could probably end up paying double the cost of the bottle by the time shipping from the UK to your place is organised, but we're getting there with a solution to that. And in the meantime, as Cameron says, you've got the original collection that goes all around Europe. We're adding a new kind of range of bottlings, not so much a new range of bottlings, that's maybe not the right way to put it, but a new label almost. So as we've said, the Authentic collection is our single cask strength range. The original collection is our 46% range, which can be whiskies from one distillery, but maybe 4, 5, 10 different casks all married together to give us a certain profile of whisky, and they're exported around the EU and the rest of the world quite comfortably. We also own and get offered from time to time casks from distilleries that we're not allowed to use the distillery name. And you've seen us do that in the past. We would have bottled those as a Speyside distillery or a Highland distillery or an Islay distillery or whatever. We also get offered casks of already blended whiskey. We own some casks of blended malt. And these kind of latter categories, they don't fit in to the Authentic collection. They don't necessarily fit into the original collection. And our blend is 7 stars. So we've already got a blend that has a certain flavour profile and stuff. So we've come up with a new label, which will basically be our way of bottling these odds and ends, almost strange things that don't quite fit in a single cask, single malt, or multiple casks from one distillery, but things like blended malts or unnameable distilleries, they'll now come out with a new label and at cask strength. So they'll be called Enigma, which is pretty much a reveal, I think, isn't it? We've not really talked much about Enigma before. We didn't really talk about whether we talk about Enigma tonight either, but I just have.
That's what I left to do.
but yeah, so the Enigma bottlings can appear sometimes alongside the original collection, sometimes they'll appear alongside the Authentic, depending on what they are. But in the September release of the original collection, there's going to be 2 whiskies in there that will carry the Enigma label. So they'll be exported around the world and they'll be bottled at cask strength. So I think we'll have 6 original collection whiskies at 46% and 2 Enigmas at cask strength. So cask strength Cadenheads will be starting to find its way out around the world in the very near future. And then, as I say, we're working on options to actually be able to distribute the Authentic collection via our own website, but at a reasonable cost. So there's been a lot of challenges dealing with COVID and Brexit and our own business model and stuff. But we're starting to see light at the end of the tunnel, which hopefully will be the news you were hoping to hear.
I think it also comes down to as well, we're like everything else, like everything's life, everything is getting more and more expensive. Casks are getting more and more expensive as well, and without sounding too downbeat about it, we're lucky we've got like stocks from many years ago that we can price at a reasonable rate. But even then, like if we were to bottle everything at the same time or just now to go with the demand, a lot of these whiskies would be nearly double the price. Some of the offers that we're getting in just now in the last couple of years, but even we found an offer from about 3 or 4 years ago that we were laughing at the time, and see now we would snap our hand off for it, thinking, oh God, we knocked that back, but looking at the price without going into details of it, it was much cheaper than what it would be now. But we never thought that would last at that point too. But we are seeing more and more distilleries pop up that we didn't see before. Costs are still pretty high, but it's good to see that there are distilleries that I mean, recently we've bought some things like Longmorn, Mortlachs, and some other stuff I can't think of the top of my head, but
Highland Park.
Yeah, unnameable Benromach, you know, things like that too that we haven't seen for a long time. They are starting to pop up a lot more, but also pricing wise too. So we are being cautious that we're not just throwing out, you know, a stock just for the sake of it as well. We have to be making sure that we've got a kind of sustainable business model as well to make sure that we can get through this as well, and obviously to help keep over 100 people employed as well. This is another point of that too. We could just go, let's just bottle all this, but that's not. It's about sustainable growth as well. So as much as it's about the whiskey too, we also have to be quite sensible about it and make sure that we look after the stocks accordingly as well. Because it is easy that we could just go, let's just bottle everything and let's bottle everything for every market. But we want to try and get more into markets soon. And it has been a bit slow, and believe me, we have been trying very, very hard behind the scenes to get this done. But I think very soon, we just did the blending 4-2 of the Enigmas just recently there. I think hopefully they'll be pretty pleased with them. I think they're of very good quality, if I don't say so myself. So if I do say so myself.
Say so yourself, indeed.
We'll move on to number 4.
5.
5 even, sorry. So look at number 4 now.
Wasn't sure who was losing count there. Yep, number 5. So I thought you'd already moved on to it when you started talking about pricing and stuff. This is our 26-year-old Springbank. What have we got? Bourbon Hogshead. Fairly sure it'll be a first fill looking at it. One of 219 bottles. And it's a pretty interesting Springbank, this one, because it's a Springbank with a lot of hallmarks of Long Row, if you ask me. It's definitely not Long Row, because our own record keeping is close enough that we generally know the difference between the two. But it's got smokier elements than I think you would typically find in a Springbank. Certainly in the nose, it's like what we've written, fisherman's rope, and it is a bit like that. Now, I typically associate old fishing boats and fisherman's rope with like Bowmore or Kalila. This is maybe a more subtle version of that, but it is kind of like that. Maybe not so much on the palate. The palate's maybe much more typically Springbank. Mango, dry tropical fruits.
Even some of those island distilleries you mentioned, when it gets that sort of 26-year-old or the older age, the ones that I've experienced anyway, they do tend to be mellow out. It's still got a lot of body behind it. It's still pretty boisterous. I don't say boisterous, that makes it sound pretty youthful, but it's not. It's got a lot of complexity as well. It's got a lot of flavour. But it's probably that smoke, I think, is probably the thing that's maybe...
But Springbank by this age has normally gone quite so tropical, you know, like really like mango, papaya, grapefruit, whatever other tropical fruits I don't eat are. But this one's got much more, it's more earthy, it's more dunnage, it's more smoky. Really, really interesting for that.
Now with this one too, cask strength against 56.7%. Bourbon Hogshead, this was matured in with 219 bottles from it. Now there's been a comment as well about this one regarding the price. So
just one.
One I've seen anyway.
That's all right. It'll be the same comment if it's not.
There is one. I think it was £600 for a Cadenhead Springbank. Congratulations, that's a massive rip-off. So
excellent. Well,
I think we kind of almost talked on it a little bit earlier on as well, just slightly earlier. Is it cheap? No, it is expensive. I think, as we mentioned, £600 for a bottle. In the market just now, for Springbank 26-year-old single cask, it's probably one of the cheapest, if not the cheapest, you're probably going to find at the moment. We don't do this as well just to try and take the mick because it's the current market as well. This gets invested back into the company. As I mentioned earlier on, we're getting offered casks of other distilleries. We even had one last week there, Benromach, same age as this one. If we purchased that cask without any profit, we would have to charge the same price. You know, and that's nothing against Benromach, but that is the sort of the way the market is just now. No, we wouldn't buy that at all.
The only solution to not bottling this and charging what we've charged for it is not bottling it at all, because you'd find yourself in over the last couple of years, I've said this a million times, more with my Springbank t-shirt on than my Cadenhead t-shirt. But if we bottled this and sold it at 150 quid, 200 quid, 300 quid, the bottles are all going to get flipped immediately.
Yeah.
And every punter who's flipping them is going to make more money on it than we are. And that's not right. Now, personally, I don't think it's right that anybody would pay 600 quid for a bottle of whiskey. But when there's a demand there for it, and we're running a business at the end of the day, we've got to buy, we can turn this one cask of Springbank into probably 20 casks of 10-year-old something else and lay them down for the future of the business.
Even nowadays, we're lucky to get that.
But you've got to view it from that perspective. Now, as Cameron said, we could charge 1,600 for this and still sell it all.
Just
that would be
we get no commission either. That's the other thing as well. No, it's not like
Springbank, like a couple other distilleries, is in a ridiculous place where demand for it is way higher than the distillery's capacity to supply it ever will be. And let's hope that doesn't last forever. But at the moment, demand for this, if we sold this for less than we're selling it for, it's going to be at auction one Saturday, and folk are making tons more than we are. And rightly or wrongly, us charging 600 quid for it's fair. And it's not fair that we charge less and then somebody else makes a fortune off it. That's completely wrong. So it's not great. 600 quid's expensive. It's hopefully, it's not a price where everybody can buy it, but it's maybe at a price where somebody can buy it and do a 10-person bottle share or something, so at least you're getting it. And also, we could have not put it in these tasting packs.
Yeah.
So at least by opening it and putting it into the tasting packs like this, alongside the other good drams that are with it, folk are getting a chance to at least try it. If you can't buy a bottle, at least you can taste it. Because how much were these packs? 40 quid?
Yeah. I should also point out as well, out of the 8 whiskies we're trying, that's the only one that's completely sold out.
And we're talking 1,600 quid.
Yeah, it's even at £600, you're still going to see them at auction sites too. But from it, we're going to invest. It's not going to. It's not through greed. It's the market for that. Do you know our jobs would be much easier if we just sold casks? By bottling. Like for instance, we've got. I better not say that just yet, but there's another distillery. We've got like things like Arbegs and Lefroy casks and Old Highland Parks and Glenvore, Rosebank. I could make an absolute I could get our year's tally just by selling a couple of those casks, pretty much, because there's a lot of speculative buyers just now paying ridiculous amounts of money for casks. Even a few years ago, and this was back before the pandemic, so now because it was just before it was the trip to Australia and New Zealand, and one of the brokers who we purchased casks from, he got in touch and he pretty much says, "Look, I know you won't be interested, but a 1993 Ardbeg, and it was probably the best part of like £500,000 to £700,000. Now we've got 93 Ardbegs, and we've bottled one since then, and we've bottled more. We're not even going to make a sixth of that.
No,
and we will charge accordingly for it. But we will not make anywhere near that kind of money. Whereas we could make 6 to 10 times more now for it.
And again, with the Springbank hat on, almost, a number of casks of this kind of age of Springbank aren't owned by the distillery or by J&E Mitchell, by Cadenhead, whoever. They're owned by private individuals. And we make an effort to buy every one of those back if we possibly can. And we'll get an email from a cask owner saying, "Okay, I'm ready to move it on. What's your best offer?" We'll make our best offer. And they don't even respond to us because other independent bottlers, other individuals are blowing those out of the water. And it's a crazy situation. It's not really a situation we enjoy, believe it or not. Maybe why you can sometimes get a wee bit shirty about being accused of ripping people off. Because I think in today's market, you're getting a good whiskey for your 600 quid. So ripping off, I feel, is harsh, but we acknowledge it's expensive. We would almost rather not to have to charge that. But if we don't sell this whiskey at something approximately worth selling it for, then we're not really doing our jobs right.
I also think we reflect on the pricing of the other bottles as well. Even I think nowadays too, like most of these are generally the kind of 45 to about £75, I think. But if you search about some of the whiskies that we've tried or we're going to be trying, you're getting to the £100 mark almost now for like 10, 11-year-old whiskey. And that's nothing against people are selling for that. That's just what the market is. But we're just fortunate that we've got stock from the past. But if people are buying from them, why don't we charge more for that as well? But we're trying to do it in a kind of fair value as well. We want to make sure that it's long term too, and also you'll know better than me, but I'm pretty sure you're not swimming in a warehouse full of 26-year-old Springbank.
No.
So it's not like we're going to have millions of these just appearing on the market, from either ourselves or Springbank. So it is a very kind of rare bottling, But hold on a second, yeah.
Well, if you thought I was miserable before the tasting.
I hear what you're saying. Go on here. I hear what you're saying about not wanting to pass profit on flippers and lose out ourselves. Ultimately, does fuel continue rising costs? What would be the thought from, say, charging £600, and if you can prove you've opened it in a voucher? That's a difficult one.
Hard to administer.
Yeah. Without policing everything, without having you'd have to get a team of people as well, actually, they would have to rise the cost for employing people for policing it.
In an ideal world, it would be great to be able to do something along those lines. And I know other, probably smaller companies than us have attempted to implement some kind of loyalty scheme or type deal, but it's not straightforward.
It isn't. And even like, for instance, if you've got somebody there who is going to drink it, but they might not. They might have a bottle that they're going to drink maybe in a year's time, and they're having to travel somewhere. And bottles and the pressure, if they're doing an aeroplane, it can put in that. But they can leak or whatever. There might be some oxidization depending on how well it's sealed. Or that's kind of like poorer things there too. But there are many other factors involved with it as well. But it's very hard to administer. I understand maybe some companies do it when they've maybe got, for instance, probably I've seen it with the local barleys, the Springbank ones, but they might not have 12 bottles to administer. Try doing that with 350 bottles, or if, say, we've got a larger vatting or something, it would be a bit of a nightmare. Again, we would love to do. We've done things in the past where we've remember years ago we asked everybody. We did a little mill, I think, at the festival, and we asked them to write the names on, like it's on the label. Unfortunately, though, people could Photoshop, so we had it was at an auction site.
Auction houses deliberately are willing to blank out the names, for sale anyway. So,
and even then, some people they don't. Some people wouldn't matter if they've got somebody's name on it anyway. They'll still buy it. They'll still. So it's very, very difficult.
I think the solution that we're doing at the moment, we're including it in tasting packs and at least letting it get out there for folk to try it, is something. I'm not saying it's the perfect solution, but at least it's something.
Also, as a segue as well, we had a question about is the tasting packs something we're going to be continue doing. It's something we've actually been trying to do for a long time, but it's not easy with the bottling schedule for us. It's probably more my fault rather than anything. Trying to get things, it's not easy to get a Cadenhead bottling done or chosen in time to get everything chosen and then filled into bottles and then sent out. Just with the nature of the industry as well, but we are getting ahead slightly, I think. So these will be in every release. It should be anyway. Where we're going to do either a tasting or there will be some kind of video explanations or whatnot. But tastings, I think we're hoping to do for each one. But just in case there's maybe for some reason everybody's on holiday and can't do a tasting, or they're traveling, or we will have a little terms. But we're hoping to do a tasting for every pack.
Yeah. And so
every release, sorry.
To have packs alongside every release is very much our intention, whether it's original collection, whether it's authentic collection, maybe even something to look at for rum releases and that kind of stuff.
Well, we did the tasting pack for the rum there. Unfortunately, people with their travelling business or they were on holiday or there was some other things going on, because we were wanting to.
Folk don't need to listen to this anyway. As folk are getting their wee bottles.
To be honest, you only listen to us too because Jenna and Grant are on holiday, and I think the guys in the shop are busy.
But no, in general, yeah, we'll have every release broken down into tasting packs and available, ideally in advance of launch. Maybe sometimes it won't quite be in advance, but yeah, if whiskey's for drinking and some whiskey's getting more expensive than folk are willing to pay the price for a bottle of, then yeah, if we can break it all down into a dram size measure and get that out there at 40 odd quid or whatever, then yeah, we intend to very much keep doing
that. Jane, do you think there's a whiskey bubble occurring? Can the marketplace absorb all the new output?
No. There's definitely a bubble occurring. There's so much whiskey being produced now. It's all got to go somewhere in order for companies to survive and make money, and I just don't know.
Would you test and repeat itself again?
That's the worry to a degree. It's not necessarily a worry for us. It's certainly not us as an independent bottler.
I'm actually quite looking forward to it, to be honest.
Scotch whisky as a category, or for all these new distilleries and stuff, I just don't know where it all goes. I think some distilleries will do fine, some will do less fine, and some won't make it. Because I think there will be a crash coming. I think there is a danger that the shark is on the verge of being jumped with some of the pricing of things, not 600 quid for a 26-year-old Springbank, but certain other things are getting ridiculous. I think particularly the cask investment crap that's going on, because I think, the great mislead, if I can call it that, in all of that, is that whiskey isn't a bar of gold. Whiskey is a depreciating asset. It might appreciate in value, but it's depreciating in bulk, and it will reach a point where it depreciates in quality.
Yeah.
So at some point, if casks are changing hands for 10 grand, 100 grand, 500 grand, £1 million, at some point somebody's going to have to bottle that to get the return on it. And at the end of that line, somebody's holding the baby of either whiskey that's fallen below 40%, whiskey that's over-matured, whiskey that's too expensive for its market. And I think the first 2 or 3 instances of that happening will pull the rug out from underneath the whole thing.
I think a lot of people are kind of duped as well over the last few years of, they see the figures, or you make X amount on your whiskey, kind of what you're saying there, but they don't explain the rest of it, and we've had a lot of inquiries into our info page asking, would you buy my cask of X distillery? It's 8 years old. We want X amount of pounds. And oh, that's ridiculous. Oh, I see this on sale for £100 a bottle here. It's like, yeah, but that's, you've got to pay duty, you've got to get the packaging, actually the transport, your rental costs, etc. Tax, everything. Top of it.
Profit.
You've got to make a profit. You have to sell it for a ridiculous amount. And I think a lot of people didn't realise what is involved with behind the scenes with it too, and probably didn't realise because they should either, if what a company like ourselves actually would pay for a cask initially, because the prices that they initially pay, that you see some, especially maybe some new distilleries or some of the investment companies are selling them for, we couldn't buy these casks. We would find it impossible, even for some of the ones, even in 10 years' time, even with inflation, you're like, we'd struggle to sell that at 10 years older at that kind of cost. So I think hopefully there's going to be a market where, and I kind of alluded on earlier, where there's some whiskies that are starting to appear that we hadn't seen for a while. Mm-hmm. And hopefully it will be a time that if there is, I don't think there'll be the same burst as there was like maybe in the 80s or in the early 90s as well, where maybe some of the newer companies might struggle a little bit, but I think a lot of the bigger ones, because they're all together as well, the conglomerates, it won't be the same amount of distilleries maybe closing, maybe some that do less production. But that means that hopefully there will be more to buy. There'll be more of the stuff that's unavailable currently that maybe we'll be able to get our hands on as well. Touch wood, that's the saying that for about 8 years now. So we'll move on to number 6. So we've went on from a distillery that you're very familiar with, Ranald, to one that
you're very familiar. No.
So this is quite a different whiskey we're trying. This is actually from the Union Distillery, which is in Brazil. Lots of questions coming up here, I bet you from. Now, this Union we actually purchased a few years ago. This one's at 5 years old. natural cask strength 56.9%. And it's been in a fresh Oloroso hogshead since March 2021. So about 2 years in the fresh Oloroso. Now, when we first purchased these casks, we actually bought 4 casks from Union Distillery. There was 2 peated, 2 unpeated, and they were in bourbon casks initially. So when they get transported from Brazil to Campbelltown, they don't come in wood. You can't transport wood from Brazil to Scotland, so they're in plastic containers. So when they arrived, we assessed the spirit, and we decided to put them into certain woods. To be honest with you, it's not some. It was more of a let's just try bourbon sherry. We thought, let's play it safe. Let's go for something a bit different. And then last year we bottled the first one, which is actually a peated Union, and that was the bourbon cask. We actually did our Cadenhead club tasting initially at the 2022 festival, and it got rave reviews. So I'm like, very good. Now this one is entirely a different beast. This is the unpeated version, and it's been in the fresh Oloroso as I said. So it's going to have more of it's got the characteristics of the sherry. It's got the dates, the menthol kind of notes as well, Madeira cake. Now, I did actually find an old sample of the Union that we had initially, and it was actually quite a sweet whiskey. It was quite strong at the time, so this is the one that we chose to actually put into the Oloroso to try and maybe just mellow it slightly, just to take a little bit of the heat off, which I think is worth it. So there is still some of that Union characteristic behind there, if you believe me, that is.
I'll take your word for it.
You take my word for it as well.
I'm sure most people watching will only have your words to go by. So.
Or they might want a quick Google search might help there as well. But Union, for those that might not know, actually are based in Bento Gonçalves in Brazil. If you don't ask me where that is to. Now they started distilling whiskey in 1972 in a different region, a different area, in Rio Grande do Sul. I'm butchering Portuguese just now, so I do apologise. So for over 50 years, they've been distilling whiskey there, or as they call it there, puro malto.
You just made that up.
It didn't take a degree in Portuguese to work that one out. But the current place that they're in Bento Gonçalves, they've been there since 2016, and this spirit was actually distilled in 2017. So it is some of the oldest spirit they've got from the new side there too. They do produce about 2 million litres a year, and they've capacity to do 3 million litres a year. Yeah. Every day is a school day.
Well, for somebody that does the research, that's for sure.
We've got a question. Do you buy private casks? Sometimes. I'll do for the Cadenhead side. You can do from because we don't buy an awful lot of private casks. We do get offered some, but when we get offered ones, maybe just for an example, somebody might say, "I've got a 1990 Highland Park. Can you make me an offer?" They've probably sent that to Gordon MacPhail. They'll probably sent it to North Star. They'll send it to Signatory. They'll send it to other independent bottlers as well. So you could be in the middle of a bidding war there. The odd time, so generally we kind of stay away from that or we'll put in an offer that we feel this is what we can go to, and you might get some response from it, but not very often we've done that. Not the time I've been here anyway. I don't think there's been a huge amount previous either. During COVID, actually, remember we got offered one. It was a 1989 Lafroig. Mm-hmm. So this person got in touch with. Do you know what? Maybe we should put in a bid for this because we've got older Lafroigs. We don't have an 89 one. I thought maybe we should. And even if we overpay for it, we could maybe hold on to it for a little bit. And we put in an offer, which even we were like, "Oh Jesus, this is quite a lot." I think, and that was 3 years ago. We probably have to sell it for probably £1,000 a bottle. They didn't even come back to us. So it wasn't even, it was basically, "Thanks for your offer, but I'll look elsewhere." So somebody must have went, because even at that, they might have went for a counter offer and go, "Could you go to X amount?" So whoever's bought that cask, they must have spent an absolute fortune on it. So we tend not to do that because you get into kind of bidding wars, but I think maybe on the, it's asked for Janie Mitchell in particular, that it's maybe...
Yeah, well, from the Springbank side, I said earlier, we try and buy back any privately owned casks we can get, but similarly, we're not going to pay through the roof for them because there's a limit to what they're worth and there's a limit to what our Springbank and Cadenhead drinkers will pay for them, and it appears that £600 approaching that. But yeah, we are dealing with people who bought their whiskey because they loved the distillery as much as they wanted to invest. Back in the 90s when Springbank was selling casks, whiskey investment wasn't really a great thing at all, if it was even anything. So some people are just delighted that the cask they paid a few £100 for is now worth several thousand or what have you. So they are happy just to deal with us on the basis that we sold it to them, we'll buy it back from them. They get some bottles from the cask and we get the rest of it, and that's a great arrangement. Other people know, I don't even know the value, but are looking just to maximise the value of it. And so, as I say, we try and make an offer that would keep the cost of the whiskey to us in line with the price we need to sell 21, 25, 30-year-old at. And if it's not within that, then the cask owner's obviously at liberty to sell it to whoever they can get more money from. And that probably happens more often than we actually get the cask back. But that's life, that's business. But yeah, we would like to buy them all back, for sure.
There's one here, the peated junior was quite nice. You said that you filled 2 sherry casks. Is the second peated cask whiskey maturing the sherry? It is, yes. So I probably explained that pretty poorly. So when we got the unions, we put one peated, we put the 2 peated into sherry and bourbon, and the 2 unpeated, one into sherry, one into bourbon as well. So we've still got an unpeated bourbon cask left and a peated sherry cask left.
I've no idea what we filled.
I've confused myself.
You put one peated into bourbon, one peated into sherry, one unpeated into bourbon, one unpeated into sherry.
There was an easier way to explain that. Sorry, that's my fault.
You'll have Nathan swearing at us again soon.
Yeah, so let's see, we'll put the veteran of the online tastings, Nathan, is here as well. We've had to take any microphones away from him, from anybody who was at the previous one. No, he's keeping his mouth shut this time. Very good, just while the camera's not on him. That was... apologies if this is answered already. What time are the bottles available from when the release date? So the release date is on Friday, and it's available from all our UK Cadenhead shops. So Edinburgh, London and Campbelltown. I don't have any, we forgot to put we used to have the details of the shops there, but I think a quick Google search should be okay for that. But
Campbelltown opens at 10.
Yeah, I think Edinburgh's 10:30 and London is
11, I believe.
You can contact these shops. I think Nathan's going to maybe find the contact details for them just now anyway, to see for availability, because I do know that this release as well, that it's been pretty popular. And the Springbank's definitely sold out, I think. But it's well worth trying in case. But the rest, I think even the likes of the Linkwood and the Glengarry and even that Orb, I think are pretty well subscribed.
There should be enough of all the ones barring the Springbank, the others should at least be findable.
Yeah.
Perfect. I really enjoyed that for such a heavily sherried whiskey, which isn't typically my type. I thought it presented really, really well.
I think as well with this one too. Actually, it was a question I got asked earlier on during the tasting, and I was asked, how do we settle on quality? How do we decide on quality? And I think there are other factors. I never really thought about it like this, but I think we do tend to do this. Another thing, when we look at certain whiskies and maybe the popularity of them, or what we can, what the quality of them, we try and price them accordingly as well. I think with this one here, it's £45. We know that Brazilian whiskey is not something that's maybe as popular as now, maybe a bit unknown, but it's something a bit new. We could have charged more for that. We knew the popularity of the first one too, but with also buying the sherry cask that we put into the transport costs as well of getting here. But we also are we're going to do fine from it as well, but we're also trying to make it available to people to try and taste as well. And from it, it's a really good sherry whiskey.
Lovely.
It's 5-year-old. If you did that in a blind tasting and didn't know what it was, it could be a Scotch whiskey or.
And I think it's to the distillery's credit, that at that age, and I mean it's, what would you say, distilled in 2017, it arrived here in 2019, late
2019. It's probably actually closer to 6 years old.
But it's been matured in Scotland longer than it's been matured in Brazil. So you can't just say that it's the warmer climate for the maturation that's helped speed it along. It's obviously pretty decent stuff that it's been maturing in Campbelltown for 3-something years maybe, and yet presents as an older whiskey, or at least not as a young whiskey. And you can't drown a young whiskey in sherry and make it taste all right. It's not the case that's what's happening. It's a good spirit and a good whiskey and a good cask. And
I think nowadays, even at the price point as well, I think it's something that's, when there's £600 whiskies out there and there's ones that are maybe like £200 and £300, I think this is something that you can open up and drink and it's not going to break the bank as well. It's something that you could have on a Tuesday night or a Wednesday night, sorry, as well, and they'll get my days mixed up. We'll move on to number 7. So we're going to dram number 7, folks. Pour down.
I can have a stab at introducing number 7
if you want to go for it.
Yeah, I don't get to do this because I'm not really a details-oriented kind of person, but more than I am anyway. So number 7, 10-year-old Knockdo, 54.3% alcohol, one of 312 bottles, and it's a whiskey that's been in a Pedro Jimenez hogshead since October 2020. So 2.5-ish years finished in PX casks, distilled in 2013, bottled just the other week there. So it's a fairly long finish in the PX casks. I think, for me, the interesting thing about this is, and you can see by looking at it, that it's not a big, huge sherry monster. Some of the PX finishes we've done, and we'll probably continue to do, are very PX heavy. By the nature of PX, it's bold, it's dominant, it's big, sweet, cloying, it's rich. But when we came across this one, Cameron is the sample man. He's got a desk made out of samples just about, because you're working through so many to try and put releases together.
It's not the name I want though.
When he's saying to me, right, we're going to look at these, I've got some Knockdo and PX, you're thinking, right, fairly solid idea of what we're going to be dealing with here. And then this isn't it. It's got the raisins, the dry fruits, the hazelnuts, that kind of stuff from the sherry casks, but it's not the big dry fruit Christmas cake monster at all. It's orangey, it's pears, it's toffee, it's appley, it's chocolatey, maybe a bit of raisins and stuff in it, but it's really, really nice.
It's done what we kind of really wanted to do. It's almost like what we want to do with a refill cask. It's to have that kind of, give it the extra body, the extra fruitiness, but not completely over dominated. And this one was a pleasant surprise when we actually, not that we thought anything bad was going to be from it, but when we saw the colour, I was like, was this a refill? Was it? No, it was definitely the first fill. So this is the kind of whiskey that I think we're trying to get with the refills too. And
considering it's been October 2020, it went into the PX cask and it's been bottled in June 2023.
Under 2 years. 3 years.
2.5 years plus. And a first fill PX cask, I mean, that is really not what we were expecting, but it's cracking.
And those that might not know Knockdo, they go with their own brand. Their own whiskies. They do by a different name. They call it the Knock range. Also, it helps stop confusion with another distillery, Knockando. Incidentally, Knockando is what Ranald tells me when I ask him for a pay rise.
I thought you were going to say for a cask as well. You're really predictable right up until the last minute. Still not funny. But.
Sorry, that's dreadful chat.
Yeah.
But yeah,
you were telling us about Knockdo and Anok and that kind of stuff.
Again, it's actually the Anok range as well. It's really good stuff too.
Much more well known for its bourbon maturations and stuff, I would say, but another good distillery, part of the Inverhouse portfolio, the Balblair, and Aye. So part of a bigger operation, certainly, but another nice, solid drinking ram.
When they're lovely whiskey rovers, a lovely drop. This one gives finishing a good name, and I think this, I think this does. I think when people hear finishes, it's maybe a term as well that I think, especially with maybe people who go towards independent bottling, there is maybe a bit more of a level where they're trying to find something. There is this. They want a certain, it's more of a niche whiskey. Yeah, that's probably the right way to do it. And I think sometimes they're maybe a bit suspicious, or when there is something that has been finished or it's not been in the same cask its entire time. And I think something like this can maybe help some of the doubters.
I also think that historically, not even that long ago, but some distilleries did so much finishing in certain types of casks and stuff that it gave finishing a bad name generally, and did really feel that suspicion, as you're saying, that what you try to hide, what you try to cover up, what was wrong with it, why did you do that to it? Because these were distilleries that tired old stocks or what have you and wanted to do something to make them presentable. But yeah, it's nice that I think people recognise that it can certainly add something, and drams like this absolutely back that up 100%.
One of the other questions we got earlier, any more grains on the horizon? Any new blends? Yeah, we do actually. We've got a grain coming out soon. Better not give out too much information yet, as it should be given first to the Cadenhead Club.
Sorry, it's all club members that are watching.
So it is. Also, they'll tell the club.
Yeah, enough.
But yeah, we've got a 34-year-old Strathclyde. 33 or 34-year-old coming out, which again, it's one that's had a finish or a second maturation in Oloroso Sherry too, but it's not one that's completely dominated.
No, it's more of this influence.
Blends as well. One of the blends we're doing is going to be for the new Enigma range. We are in the process of doing some blending as well. We'll have the new release of 7 Stars as well. The next batch of that should be from this year. I think from August time, I think the next batch of 7 Stars is.
Well, we're doing the old 25-year-old blend in Enigma in September that will go global.
Yeah.
Prior to that, we're doing one cask of that same blend.
Yes.
The best of the casks is going to be exclusively available through our Cadenhead shop in Edinburgh. I say exclusively, there might be some bottles in Campbelltown and London as well. But because August in Edinburgh is the Edinburgh Festival, so the city's always heaving, and our shop there struggles to kind of cope with demand. So we're trying to sort of do some special one-off odds and sods bottlings for these kind of events. So it'll be a 25-year-old blend through Edinburgh for that as well.
And I'm sure we've got something else planned. If we do, I can't remember it. Well, it's maybe the next batch of 7 Stars we're trying to get. So I'm actually ahead of myself, so just ignore me. We've got one here from Gav's Drams. When someone buys a cask, where does it lie? Who keeps it? It can vary, Gav. When we're buying casks, it's not necessarily lying at that distillery. In fact, it very rarely is. We've just recently had a cask pull in the last couple of weeks there. We had Pulteney casks that were lying, I think, at Glenrothes. We had a heavily peated Bunnahabhain that were lying at Inchdairney. We had, but they're all over the place. Another issue that we've probably got is trying to get the cask pulled in. We've even had casks there that we've been trying to get in since last June that just arrived last week. Sometimes depending on how cooperative the warehouse is or that we're getting them from, depends on how many pickups they might do. They might only do a pickup every quarter, because maybe they're so busy that they'll only allow the collection of your casks at a certain time of the year. Then you've got to get the transport ready at that particular time. We've got so many casks offsite that we need to try and get here. The other issue in that is that we don't have a huge amount of space here either. Even though we have built a new warehouse just recently, we've done quite well of filling it up too. And we still need a lot more space as well. And they're not cheap warehouses. That last one cost us quite a bit.
Twice as much as we budgeted for.
Yeah, so it's something that space is a bit of an issue, but we are trying to figure that out as well, which again is something that we're investing in as well. We need to try and get that sorted, but they can be all over the place. It's very rarely that we'll buy casks of a distillery that's actually lying at that distillery, so they can be all over the place. Tomatin, I've got quite a lot of space. They do a lot of storage of casks as well, but again, a lot of kind of maybe Diageo distilleries, and it doesn't necessarily have Diageo products on it. They can have other ones too. So they're all over the country, but we need to try and get as many here as possible. Then we can evaluate them, because we've got thousands of casks off site. Really, it's a lot, and we're buying ones all the time too. So it's something that we are trying to get a handle on. It's just not so easy. It means we get more samples as well.
Sample man needs fed.
Any more brandies, cognacs due to come out? Not in the near future, but it's something we're working on. We, again, since Brexit, France has been very difficult to actually get samples from. Even just sending like samples from a cognac supplier to us. In fact, it came to the point where one of the cognac suppliers we're speaking to, the easy solution was us to go over there, which actually maybe need to take up. Maybe take that up on it. Yeah.
Seriously.
Whereas normally it was just easy to send over a package of samples to try. It's just been that hectic. I think just now that we've just maybe let it slip. But I think now that we're getting past the festival and whatnot, I think it's something that we should look into a bit more. But the intention is, yes, that we should have some more in the future.
Yeah, we really want to get into our other spirits range. We've spent the last few years getting the whiskey stuff to where we want it to be, getting that cask management program that I was talking about into place, and as Cameron says, getting as many of our casks here as possible. And now that we're starting to get that under some form of order, I think looking in more detail at our rum releases, cognac, Armagnac, World Calvados, world whiskies, we've got odds and sods like the Union, and we've also bought some Indian whiskies, some English whiskies, some Swedish, but getting more of a thing going with that, maybe looking at regular bottling patterns of that kind of stuff, maybe even some of them that have been really popular, maybe doing a consistent bottling of the way we do our classic rum and Old Rad's gin, maybe having a Cadenhead's Calvados or a Cadenhead's cognac, something like that, Cadenhead's American whiskey, maybe, who knows.
we talked about 4 years ago, actually, looking to get a Cadenhead's cognac, like our classic rum, a continuous product. Again, just unfortunately global pandemics and silly politics got in the way of that one, but it is something we are trying to, we possibly have made some movement on it in recent times as well, but we definitely are looking into that. Ruth's asked, any special bottlings or shenanigans for the Courtyard event? September, a cage? Shenanigans, yeah, I think so. This might be such a cage, maybe a vault.
Possibly, that might be the term we're using this time. The Courtyard, we're really trying to set that up to be an event where you come and hang out at Cadenhead's, and anything else that comes off the back of that comes off the back of it. Like, yeah, there's one warehouse tasting for everyone who's got a ticket. Other than that, it's going to be music, chat, some form of food to try and keep everybody semi-sober, bar, open, cocktails, whiskies. Just come to Cadenhead's, chill out for the day and have a laugh. Really, all the best bits of the Malts Festival, but just brought down to sitting with like-minded people, chatting away, having a carry-on and a bit of a good day out, rather than standing in queues or that kind of stuff. There'll be, just Cameron says, there might be a vault rather than a cage, but hopefully, like the last Courtyard event, that's going to be done in a kind of light-hearted, easy-going manner. Yeah, it's not. We're not. It will be done in a way that people aren't having to queue up 24 hours prior to it as well. Because we will hose you down, because it's Springbank would never do that, but Cadenhead's will get out the power hoses and wash you away.
Whiskey Rovers asked, is there any distillery you'd like to bottle or get more of? I think I'm probably going to speak for you here, but there's one that I've always wanted to, and I'm pretty sure you would too, and it'd be Kilhoman for me.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I've asked Anthony Wills many times before, and he's given me a short, sharp response. But yeah, I think Kilhoman I'd love to get. But any other distillery I'd love to get more of, definitely. I think we've still got stock of it, but to have more supply, I think things like Glenlossie, I know it's not maybe as well known or as maybe, but it's a really good quality spirit, and even it's becoming much harder to come by now. Obviously, there's the obvious ones like your kind of Klein Leash.
The interesting ones for me are the newer distilleries. You know, we own casks from a few of the new distilleries, the new wave of distilleries, but you know, the other one alongside Kilhoman for me would probably be Daphne.
Oh God, aye, that's a good show.
When you speak to these guys and you see their production volumes and production methods, not so much Kilhoman because they produce plenty, they can sell us a few casks and not even notice they were missing now. But you know, Francis at Daphne and stuff, they're you know, we talk about Springbank not being able to supply demand. Well, they're going to be in the same position, so it's perfectly understandable that they're maybe not forthcoming to independent bottlers such as ourselves, but still nice to dream.
Yeah, no, definitely. And in fact, in a few weeks' time, myself and Grant McPherson, who's our UK general manager, we're going to be going on a trip down south to visit the distillery.
A border raid.
We're going to raid to England for a distillery that we've never actually bottled before. And hopefully, maybe get some casks from there. Won't name it just yet.
Just in case it doesn't happen.
Yeah, just in case the tales. No chance. You guys aren't coming. So hopefully we'll have some more casks from there. Some casks from there very shortly.
Be nice to get some more out in Merkin as well.
Yes, hopefully. I think that's
there were a couple of good casks that we did from there. Another good new distillery.
It was quite when we went to Ardnamurchan as well. We've known the guys for a long time as well, but there was never any discussion of, you know, what can we get. So we're in the warehouse and we're giving some samples. So they kind of, so what are you looking for? We're like, well, what can you sell? Like, if you're going to sell us a cask, we'll buy a cask. If you're going to sell us 20 casks, we'll buy 20. So we managed to get 2 from them. So, but they've agreed that hopefully we can get some more off them as well in the future. Any casks from some of the new Fife distilleries? Do we? Not yet.
Not yet, no.
No, definitely. I'm trying to think of some of the other lists as well.
Yeah.
No, unfortunately, not. But again, we're always interested. It's something that a lot of the new distilleries will sometimes contact us as well. You know, we've got the recognition, the name as well, so it can be something that helps both parties as well. And I think that's some of the best parts of it too, that we can get some new spirit we've never tried, and it also helps maybe some new distilleries get their name out too. But I understand why maybe some feel that they can go on their own and do it, so that's fair enough. But if people are looking for a collaboration, we're always interested in that too. So we're going to the final dram of tonight. So last but not least, we have one from the Glen Grant distillery, 14 years old. This one's 59.9% in alcohol, this one. And this one has been in a Pedro Jimenez hogshead since March 2021. So just over 2 years. Now, actually, this one wasn't initially in a bourbon cask. This is one that was actually in a sherry butt prior to this. I think we got it about 2020 or 2021. We got 2 casks of it.
I think we
bottled one of the casks a couple of years ago, and it was quite a very light style sherry. It wasn't, you know, I think we even bottled it in the green label because it wasn't sherry. Because it wasn't sherry to what you might expect it to be sherry. So that's more of a subtle. That was really good because it was very strong as well. That was in the sort of low 60s too. But a lot of great characteristics with it. But the other cask was just a bit hotter. Not hotter, but needed something. Spicier. It needed something to maybe melt. So we decided to put it into 2 PX hogsheads. We actually bottled one of them last year, I think. Should really know this. So this is the other cask of it as well. At the time, we thought, and it was quite funny because even though we split the same cask, put them into 2 casks that we got exactly the same time, they tasted so different.
They're really divergent, absolutely.
So this one we decided to leave, and then we just came back to it not that long ago. And thought, do you know what? I think we'll go. It's quite a big beast. This one. This is
There's a reason it's the last whiskey in the set.
Well, we kind of deliberated that to put something like the Springbank at the end, and the Springbank's quite a big bold one too. But we thought maybe this one's got a lot of that kind of that meatiness, the plum jam, the apricots. It's got that kind of leather as well. That kind of like the it's a big bold one. This too. We thought this one would probably be the best at the end. It's got that kind of.
And even it's, we spoke with the Knock Do about it having a fairly subtle PX influence. This has got a much, much bigger PX influence, but it's still not just like a dram of highly alcoholic PX. It's still got the whiskey background to it as well. I think it's pretty well balanced between cask and dram.
The sherry bat it was in before was very little influence of the sherry. It was
refill.
As I said earlier, it's more of a holding vessel it was in rather than something that's any kind of wood that's going to give it any kind of cask influence. So pretty much most of the sherry characteristics is came from the PX from this. Prior to looking back at the notes, it might have had a little of that, a little kind of sultana note, even from a refill sherry cask, even as tired as that one, but it was nothing to really suggest that was from a sherry cask. But this is just giving it that bit of boisterous. I think a bit more bold flavours. I think as well with the high ABV too. I think a little bit of water in this one for me. I think just helps to sort of. I don't mean take the edge off. It just opens up slightly.
59.9% is a lot of alcohol in any whiskey, let alone a 14-year-old. Like what strength do we reckon these beasts were filled at? It certainly wasn't 62.5.
Well, that's 14 years old. Did they forget to do the reduction, maybe?
But distilleries fill at different strengths depending on their own needs and stuff as well. But this is a big beast. You've probably it's a sherry cask matured whiskey for sherry cask lovers.
Yeah, definitely.
Which in saying that should take it as far away as possible from my typical style, but actually I can appreciate the qualities in this one.
Well, Finlay was in the tasting notes session for this one. Have you ever seen our tasting notes? It's got pastel de nata. That's Finlay was obviously in the what is it? Is it a
Portuguese
tart or something?
So guess who went to Portugal in his honeymoon?
Yeah, that's
and Thunderbread. That's a very Finlay one as well, and it's in the tasting notes as well.
But no, I think with that too. If there's any other questions, I think we'll probably finish up soon. But first of all, I'd just like to say thank you everybody who actually bought a pack and who's watched the tasting as well, or if you've watched it later on at another time. We do really appreciate that. It's something we are going to be doing more of as well. Since COVID as well, the heat bringing COVID up all the time, when we started doing the online tastings, then that was through necessity. But we never, at the beginning, I never really thought that these would still continue. But going forward, it's actually worked out really well. On a Wednesday night, you can do it from the comfort of your home rather than maybe having to travel an hour to get to a venue and then travel an hour back. And I think getting to try whiskies before they're released as well, I think that's something, because we're pretty proud of what we do as well. So it's not a case of we're trying to hide anything. Again, with the likes of the Springbank, as we said, we could have left that out. We're doing another tasting pack for another release, the next release that comes out. Again, there's a whiskey on that we're doing in the pack that we could have left out, but we feel that we want the whiskey to be drunk. And to do this, we're trying to price it accordingly so that people can actually join in and try and taste it. So we do appreciate everybody who has joined the tasting and who's been supportive of it as well. Ruth's asking, what is Thunderbread? What is it again?
I'm led to believe, although certainly no expert in the subject, it's the bread that's baked, prepared and then baked underground in Iceland.
Oh,
so it's
that's
the
right.
from the the natural rocks on Iceland. Never tried it, so can't verify whether this whiskey's got anything to do with Thunderbird or not. But
another one. It's probably not so much for me, but we'll for you this one. If you know it, is there a premium for peat nowadays?
Not yet. Not yet. I can imagine it'll come, but no, it's not carrying excessive premiums. It might be getting a little bit more expensive, but it's not unreasonable in line with everything else.
Marcus, who is one of our colleagues, actually just answered. It's rye bread. Similar can be bought in Lidl and Aldi and other good supermarkets as well, of course. Thanks, Marcus. Brilliant. Excellent. So, basically, just to say again, thank you very much for, and also thanks to Nathan for not swearing this time. That's verbally, anyway, yes. And we hope you enjoyed the tasting packs as well. Again, as we spoke about earlier on, too, if there are any interest, or if you'd like to contact our shops, I think Nathan's put some links up as well there to them as well. So thank you very much. Slange.
Yeah, cheers, folks.